Back on Morning Line, final segment with John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association. And we are going to take as many calls as we can. How about that? Let's do that and just answer their questions, get their comments. We've got a few Tonys. Tony, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Tony, go ahead.
You know, the majority of Americans, especially conservative Americans, are getting ignored in the media. When the polls show that many people are behind Trump and then the media turns on Trump, I don't think that would happen to the Democratic Party. That kind of is a reflection of what's wrong with America in general. We're ignoring the Constitution. We're ignoring the people's rights. And, you know, millions of men and women have died to defend these rights. And the most powerful weapon in the world is the tongue. And they'll defend the First Amendment vigorously and all the other amendments vigorously. And they talked about ignorance of the Constitution. The biggest ignorance on this issue is that gun rights were not protected by the government and the Constitution for hunting. It had nothing to do with hunting. The majority of the power in this country has to be in the hands of the people to protect democracy. And anybody who knows the Constitution, anybody who knows constitutional law will agree with that. And the only way to do that is to keep the power in the hands of the average American. And the only way to do that is to keep them armed. You know, I said this before, and you said something about a Harrier jet coming to my house and taking my guns if they want to take them.
Yeah.
Take mine. They can take yours. They can take the guy sitting next to you, but they can't take them all. And that's what they know. And they want control. And the bad part is that they're in control of the gun laws. And this isn't, you know, somebody said I sounded angry. I am angry. My country's under attack. I served in the war, and I'm a veteran, and they're trying to take my guns away right now. They're trying their best to get me on PTSD, which is a mental issue, so they can take my guns away later. There is no doubt in my mind, and every veteran that I've talked to agrees with that.
Why do you think they want to take them from you, or whoever they are?
Well, to disarm the people who are the most trained is the most effective way to get control of the people. And we are the most trained people in America in weapons.
Right, okay, all right.
It's common sense.
I remember when he's called in before, and I think he's a little edgy on that, and he takes it very personally, but I mean, the Second Amendment's very I don't see it. I mean, I see people like him saying they're trying to take our guns away. I'm sorry, I don't see, you know, and people are afraid certain candidates. Look, everyone thought, you know what, the gun companies and ammo companies should write a nice big check to President Obama, because when he got elected, everyone thought, oh my gosh, all this stuff's going to happen. It's all going to be taken away. And those gun companies made money hand over fist. I remember doing stories. There were lines out the door thinking that the next day after he took office, all of a sudden all these guns were going to go away. What a bunch of buffoonery, all right? That didn't happen, and you know that didn't happen.
It didn't happen at all.
No candidate would ever get elected advocating, I want to get rid of all the guns. It's just not going to happen in this country.
But he brings up an interesting question, and it is this. The Second Amendment was written to protect a pre-existing, according to the Supreme Court, Scalia, a pre-existing right. The Second Amendment didn't create the right of firearms ownership in the public. It protected it as a pre-existing right.
Okay.
Now, in 1934, Congress passed, and this was, you know, pre-prohibition kind of stuff, the National Firearms Act, which is the law at the federal level that regulates the ownership of machine guns, short-barrel rifles, short-barrel shotguns, destructive devices, and suppressors. Now, they're not banned. You can own all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. You can make that stuff if you register it. Mm-hmm. But they're taxed. There's a $200 transfer tax on each one. There was a case that went to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1939 concerning the intent of the Second Amendment under that act.
Okay. Some
people challenged it, saying Congress lacked the authority because of the Second Amendment to regulate those kinds of weapons. And not the Supreme Court opinion, what I think is interesting in light of Tony's comments,
sure,
but the brief that was filed by the United States Attorney General at that time said it is beyond dispute that Congress lacks the authority to regulate the civilian ownership of weapons suitable for military use. But the particular weapon in that case, which was a sawed-off shotgun, the argument was, is not a weapon used by the military. It's only used by criminals, and so we can regulate it. And so I think the interesting thing is back in '39, the federal government even recognized they couldn't regulate by prohibition the ownership of military-style weapons, machine guns. but they could tax it, which is the prohibition link. And now we've gone almost 90 years later, and the general public believes that those very weapons that the U.S. Attorney General said we couldn't even regulate out of existence are now somehow perceived as beyond the scope of civilian ownership.
Yeah, but as you said, that's not true. You can own them if you have the proper things. But look, I have no problem with Tony owning a gun. I have no doubt he is skilled with a weapon. Let's go to Gerhardt. Gerhardt, good morning.
Good morning. I got 3 scenarios.
Okay.
First scenario, a family divorce and kids, they take medicine. They want guns to hunt, but a part of the family wants to sell the guns. Scenario 2, the grandfathers taught them how to hunt. The family members. And scenario 3, when you go get your hunting license, shouldn't that be required, whatever, that test if you're allowed to have a gun? And who should have a gun between if the kids get the somebody took medicine, would they be eligible to have guns in Iowa?
Okay, if they're, I didn't catch everything he said there, but it sounded like the last question was if you're on some kind of medication, can you have access to weapons? And that gets, I don't know,
That's a really tough question, and it gets to that aspect of both federal and state law as to whether someone with a mental illness should have access to firearms. And it's almost what Tony brought up just previously with our veterans having just rampant diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And the government using that diagnosis as a means to disarm them because post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental illness. So just being on medications, let's say you take a painkiller because you've got a bad back, that's not going to prohibit you. Where we see the prohibition is if you are on a psychiatric medication. And the government says basically if you, for whatever reason, are on psychiatric medications, you may lose, and in many instances do lose, your ability to own a firearm.
All right, let's go to Ross. Ross, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Nick. It's Ross Marina. How you been?
Hey, Ross, good to hear from you. What's up, my friend?
Not a lot. It's been a while since I talked with you. I'll be brief because I know there are others waiting. Real quick, I'm going to take you to task here as far as calling people's reaction to Obama's being elected by buying more firearms as buffoonery. I would say instead, Nick, that's paying attention.
But the things they feared were going to happen did not happen. All those items they bought like crazy didn't go away.
No, not overnight. This is true. No,
I mean, that's all my point was that they way overreacted and the gun companies were laughing all the way to the bank.
and that's their right.
Oh, sure. They had every right to do it. It's just, they didn't have to run out that day before he took office thinking all of a sudden all the gun stores were going to close. And some people actually believed that.
Well, actually, people like Hillary Clinton and Senator Feinstein have said publicly that they won't be happy until all handguns, all long rifles, all firearms are removed from the citizenry entirely. They've said that publicly, and the people are reacting to that by going out when somebody like Obama or Hillary or whoever gets elected and buying more guns. And one other thing, real quick, I'll let you go after this.
Sure.
The two things that the government will never have enough of, money and power. And they have to take both of them from the citizenry, don't they?
Yeah.
And how are they going to do it when most of us have handguns, most of us have long guns, most of us have shotguns? They can't, and they know it.
Well, I mean, the government is supposed to, in a perfect world, which we are far from, serve us. What I don't like are those buffoons who took over the wildlife center in eastern Oregon with their guns and didn't want to cooperate with federal land and what was going on. That was wrong on every level. If that's what you're referring to, I disagree with you when you talk about having guns to resist the government. Now, if the government wants to start invading your privacy and do things, yeah, you protect yourself. But, come on now. We don't need guns because the government's not coming knocking on his door to take his weapon away right now. It's just not. That's paranoia. I don't know where that comes from.
Well,
but I mean, I don't see it. And I'm an advocate for people owning guns. I don't have a problem with it.
The most recent example I know of is happened in Tennessee, and it's called the Battle of Athens. And it's where, after World War II, members of the military returned to small town Tennessee, found out it was under political corruption. The elections were getting ready to transpire, but they clearly weren't going to transpire favorably. And members of the returning military went and got firearms to regulate the election.
To make sure it remained fair.
Remain fair, but it was civilians opposing a corrupt government, and it happened right here in Tennessee. Not to say
when was that?
Battle of Athens was in the late 40s, early 50s.
Okay. Huh. Let's squeeze in one more call or two if we can. Ralph, oh no, we lost Ralph. Let's go to Granger. Hi, Granger.
Yes, I just wanted to muddy the waters a little bit. We talk about our training for firearms, but we always exclude suicide. There's a study out of the University of California at Davis that looked at national deaths with firearms. They found 1 to 2% of the deaths were accidental. About a third of them were homicides, but 2/3 of the deaths were suicides. When you go to get training with firearms, most trainers do not even mention the suicide. And I know I've talked to John before about that, and I just wanted him to comment on that. And
okay, we just have 30 seconds, John. I'm sorry, but the suicide issue, as you said, it does kind of muddy it, because I don't know where that lands in this
unlike
discussion.
the Islamic trend of teaching people to commit suicide for political
bombers,
agenda. We don't really, we as a nation seem to ignore the issue of suicide.
Yeah.
We don't have a good strategy for how to identify people that are particular risk, or to cope with them if they need help effectively and timely. And they do. They resort to drugs and guns.
There's a lot of ways to commit suicide, sadly, and that does. John, as always, a pleasure having you on.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you again soon. We'll continue to track what happens at the legislature. We'll have you back on, all right?
Very good.
Thank you, my friend. Back with a programming note right after this.